Hi, this is Maureen Driscoll, and welcome to my 7-part series of how to write a romance novel. We're at chapter 5, or I guess episode 5. Whatever I've been calling it, just pretend I just said that. Number 5, the writing portion. This episode gives you some tips, including a whole section of what to do when you get stuck. And let's jump right on in. Okay, so if you've been following along from the very beginning, you know your genre, you know your characters, you know your conflict and obstacles. You even have your non-outline outline. And so now it's time to actually sit down and write. And I know that that can automatically give writer's block to people, knowing that they've got the blank page or the blank screen and they just got to go do it. But these are some writing tips that I've found very helpful. And also, before I start, if you asked 100 writers what their procedure is, you get 100 different answers. So there's no right answer. It's just whatever works for you. But these have been helpful for me. One of them is to get a writing schedule and then stick to it. So it's not enough to just say, oh yeah, I'm going to write, every morning from like 5 till 7. You got to actually do it. And it depends on what your schedule is. Very few people can dedicate the entire day to writing. So it's kind of a you can do to sort of squeeze it into a time period. And also that affects frequency. Like, let's say that you can get like a very quality, quiet 4-hour block on like a Tuesday. Do it. Even if that's the only thing you can do all week, do it. Take advantage of that. That's much better than sort of doing a frenetic, like, well, maybe I can squeeze this in here and squeeze this in there. Whatever is going to get you to the computer in sort of a relatively calm state of mind that you can concentrate on your writing, that's a good time to write. But you have to make sure you keep doing it. Personally, for me, I write every single day with rare exceptions because, might be I'm just overwhelmed one day or don't feel well or whatever. I do take the occasional breaks. But for me, that one day that I'm not, writing, and then the next day that I was like, well, maybe I'll just get back to it in a couple of days. And pretty soon it's been like weeks and I haven't written anything. And that's bad for me. I really need to write every single day. And also forgive yourself if that happens, but also realize that once you get back into it, I will have forgotten everything I wrote up to that point. So I'm losing more time by having to go back, reread what I wrote. So if at all possible, get yourself on a schedule and stick to it. Point number 2, a lot of people will ask whether or not they write and rewrite at the same time or just write and rewrite later. And again, that's up to you, whatever works well. I know there's an author who I just love, Sabrina Jeffries. She does Regency romance. She is wonderful. And she says that she rewrites as she goes. And by the time she gets done with her first draft, that's the draft she hands in. Like, it's that good. I mean, because she's done the rewriting. I usually don't do that, just because for me, I can, if I write and then go back to read what I wrote, a lot of times I can get into this like never ending cycle of like, ooh, is this the best word? What if I use this word? And really, instead of forcing myself to go forward with story, I just go back and like, oh, well, maybe I can fiddle with this a little bit longer. And so it is counterproductive for me. But Sabrina Jeffries, it's the way she writes, and it works really well for her. So wherever you are, that's the one that's going to work for you, as long as you are moving forward. Like, you really don't want to get stuck too much if you're just like, fiddling with the words instead of just writing, continuously and moving forward with the story. Because I thought I had a better point than that. But yeah, just it's whatever happens. Now, what I do is by the end of the first draft, I call it a blurt draft because I do go off my non-outline outline, but the writing itself is not going to win any awards, in part because I can't show it to anyone because it really only makes sense to me. Like, this is not something I could share with someone and say, what do you think of this? So I immediately, after I get done with that first draft, which is just throwing everything onto the page, I immediately go back to the beginning and I start over. And usually, and I repeat that process, it's rare that I actually show one of my drafts to somebody before like the fifth one, maybe the fourth, if I've been a very good girl, but it's mostly the fifth. And that's okay, because by the time I get to the fifth draft, and each draft goes a little bit faster because, as they say, you can't edit a blank page, but once you have something to edit, you can go through and, fix this, fix that. It's also interesting to me, probably only, but when I go through and I'll, read a patch and be like, whoa, I was on fire that day. This is fantastic. And then I will get to the end of that day's writing and I'll be like, oh, I was not on fire the next day. So that's, I don't know, kind of interesting. But that's my process, is that by the time I get to like the fifth draft, then someone else can see it. Number 3. Oh, okay. You do not need to write sequentially, because a lot of times all of us have different parts of the story, and it's usually in the middle, as I have mentioned before. We'll get stuck at some point. Even with your non-outline, you'll get stuck because you'll be like, oh. So you could sit there and, figure this out and like, oh, like this isn't working. And it's okay to have a few days when nothing really happens other than you being like, oh, how am I going to get this done? But when it becomes a little bit longer than a few days, you just need to move on. And sometimes for me, if I know I'm in, I don't know, chapter 5 and this is not working, but I do know what's happening in chapter 8 and I can't wait to write that. Sometimes just going to chapter 8 and writing it just keeps the process moving forward. And again, that's our goal, forward. So that's a wonderful way just to keep going and to not limit yourself to, I'm stuck. Also, sometimes writing the end before you do anything else or early in the process is actually a good thing, because when you know where your characters are going to end up, it's a good thing, as I just said. Oh, bribe yourself. Now, I'm not talking about like, oh, if I finish this chapter by Thursday, I'll, buy myself something lovely. You could do that. But for me, what happens is there will be these days where I'm like, I just can't, I don't want to go. I don't want to write. And I'll say, okay, you don't have to write X amount of words, but can you write 500? Can you get out? Because 500 is like, what is that, like a tweet these days? And I'm like, and I tell myself I can do 500 words, even when I'm like, I can't do 500 words. No, I can do 500 words. And a lot of times once I get to the computer and I start writing, the 500 words come out, and then like more words come out. So it's just, it's this nice little game you can play with yourself, which also brings up another point of how many words per day should you write. That depends on how many words per day you want to write. Sometimes for me, they come, not easily all the time, but some days they flow better than other days. So I kind of have a general goal in mind of how long I want this book to last. And sometimes I hit it and sometimes I don't. So it's up to you. I wouldn't set it too outrageously high, just because that can be discouraging, but whatever you think you can manage and that will keep you writing, in this rhythm is a good thing. Do you notice there's like a trend going on here of like whatever works for you is something you should do. Now, back to the word count thing, it brings up another point, which is NaNoWriMo. I have only done NaNoWriMo twice, and it wasn't official either time. I just started writing in November because one of the times it coincided when I was just starting a new book. And so I decided to do it. And one time it worked out, which is the time when I was starting the new book. And it was good because I needed to get back on track. I've completed my 50,000 words. I went on after that, finished the book. It was a good process. The other time I did it, I think I lasted like 6 days or something. And I can't remember what exactly derailed me, but I got derailed. Okay. It depends on what you like. If you love doing NaNoWriMo, keep doing it. But it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. Because there's some people, they like the community, they like connecting with other writers, they like the process, they like talking about it, and that is awesome. That in itself is enough reason to keep doing it. But it is hard. And also in the United States, it's a bit inconvenient because it coincides with Thanksgiving, which for those of you outside of the country, it is, I'd say either way from like 2 to 4 days of gluttony. It's so much fun. But it's difficult because there's, a lot of people are traveling, you've got guests. It's a very difficult time to sit there and have to like do whatever the count is, like 1,800 words a day or something. So it can kind of, it means you're going to be writing more at other parts of the month. And also it's just a stressful time of year for a lot of people. So it's just not, they should have it in June. No, people go on vacation. And they shouldn't do it in February because it's a short month. I don't know. I don't know when they should do it, but November is not really a great month in the United States. But if you are doing NaNoWriMo and you're like, ugh, and you get to the end of the month and you just have basically thrown words onto the page and you end up not ever doing anything with the thing that you wrote, and it makes you feel bad about yourself, don't do it. Stop. Seriously, stop. If all of those things are true. Now, if you just like the sense of accomplishment of getting the 50,000 words done and it doesn't matter that you're not going to do anything with that book, that's fine. But if it affects your self-esteem or it affects your opinion of who you are as a writer because this thing that you did doesn't go anywhere, then stop. Because if you start NaNoWriMo with a pretty good outline or pretty good idea of where you're going to go, that can be great because you can get those 50,000 words and you're like, all right, check this off. A month is very fast to, get the bulk of a novel done. But if you end up being like, okay, well, maybe I can just do a scene about like the birds, and you just keep throwing words on the page because you need to get, you need the ticker to tick over. That's probably not the best use of your time. But again, it's totally up to you on that, obviously. But just keep it in mind. Oh, okay. And my final tip in this section is don't get distracted. And by that, I mean, when again, at some point, you're going to be stuck. You're going to be like, ugh. And it's kind of going to be like in maybe the 35 to 40% mark in there. And you're going to be like, oh, no matter how good your non-outline is, you're going to be like, oh, I'm stuck. And then what's going to happen is you're going to think of another idea. And it's like, oh, that idea is fantastic. If that thing would flow, that thing would write itself. Except nothing writes itself. So all writers should have something. And again, here I am with the paper again. Maybe it's a notepad, like physical paper, that when you get an idea, go, oh, I'm going to write that down. Or you dictate a note on the phone, or you type in the note yourself, or you have a computer file, whatever it is. Again, however you do the writing thing, do the writing thing. But you keep track of these ideas because it has happened to me before that I'm in the shower and I get this great idea. And by the time I get out of the shower, I forgot it. Because that can happen. But definitely, if I can remember by the time I get out of the shower, I write it down so I can save it for later. But I guarantee you, if you are stuck on this thing and you're like, you know what, I'm going to write this thing instead, and you start writing this thing about, I don't know, 35 to 40% into that script, you're going to get stuck again because people just get stuck in scripts. So just don't know when a shiny object is like, oh, as opposed to, this is really this, lightning striking, I have to get rid of this. Really stick with this. Writing is hard. Sometimes you have to force yourself to get in the chair, or if you have a standing desk, I don't know, but whatever. Sometimes you just have to force yourself to keep going and learn how to know the difference between I'm going to keep on doing this because I know this is a great story, but I get stuck, versus, like this really is worth my time and attention right now when it can probably wait. This segment is about how to get unstuck. Now, if you're just in the middle of one section and you're just like, oh, I don't know what to do, you can sit there for the allotted time and see if you can, work through it. If this happens the next day, you can, as I said in the early segment, you can maybe go forward into a section that you're not stuck on, and maybe that'll help. Sometimes I go back and I start rereading from the beginning, not editing, because I'm not a big fan from my personal, process of editing as I go. But sometimes when I read something that I've already written, it'll strike me as like, oh, that's right. I can maybe follow up on that, or I can follow up on this. Sometimes I'll get up. If that doesn't work, I get up and I clean house. So I really hope the other part works. Clean, you could play with your dog. You could have your cat ignore you. I don't like cats. Take a walk around the block. Getting outside is like a really good thing. All of those things that will get you away from the computer. Reading a book, like just doing something where your mind is concentrating on something else is really good, because sometimes it's in the downtime that ding, you get that idea and you can go back to write. Now, let's say this has gone on for a while and you're not making any progress whatsoever, and you tried all those really great ideas. This is like the check engine light going off, which goes off a lot in my world. And when the check engine light goes off for writing a novel, it's almost always indicating that there's something wrong with the plots. And specifically, there's not enough conflict and obstacles in your book. Sorry. So you are going to have to go back to that non-outline outline and take a look at the story itself, because we're readers, our sort of internal critic knows when we have a story and knows when we don't quite have a story, because we've seen good stories all along. We've written good stories all along, but our inner critic is like, something is quite off, something is off, something's broken, let's go fix it. So that is the time to go back and review the hard work that you already did and try to fix things. And usually, like I said, it is because there's not enough conflict. There aren't enough obstacles, because the whole thing with a romance novel is they can't get together too easily because it's not satisfying. Like, something has to, and I'm not saying you have to keep them apart to the very end, but there has to be something in this dance between the two of them. And it has to, again, none of this fake stuff, none of the like, oh, I guess I just didn't hear that right. No, none of that, none of the easily solved problems. You really want conflict, not arguing necessarily, but you want conflict between the characters, their situation. If there's another story, hopefully there is, other than just a romance, maybe you can sort of tinker with that. But if you are stuck, it's usually because there's something wrong that you have to go fix. And what you don't want to do is keep on going and do like I did and have to throw out 120 pages of your manuscript. Yikes, it still gives me nightmares. So try the other stuff first, try the easy fixes, reread what you did, write anywhere you know where the story is. And when if that still doesn't work and fix it, you need to go back to the drawing board and, reconfigure your story. Sorry. Thank you for joining me for part 5 of How to Write a Romance Novel. If you enjoyed this, please hit thumbs up, give it a comment, share it with your friends, and hopefully you'll be back for part 6, which is rewriting. Thank you so much.